In this lesson, we're going to talk about both client-side validation and unobtrusive client-side validation. So let's break it down. Client-side validation will handle validation on the client or on the web browser so that a full HTTP post is not necessary. Instead, it will just do the validation on the client using JavaScript. It still uses data annotations, but it dynamically will add IDs and classes to your HTML5 tags. It'll add JavaScript to your views and so on. So that's client-side validation. Unobtrusive client-side validation still handles validation on the client, still doesn't require a full HTTP post for validation. It still uses data annotations, but it adds very little IDs and classes and things of that nature to your HTML that might affect the CSS styles that you or your designers created. And so that's really the intent of unobtrusive client-side validation. Very little JavaScript, very little that will touch anything that would interrupt the styles that you have that you're working with. So that's the benefit of it. That's why people want to use unobtrusive client-side validation. And how does it do it then? I mean, if it doesn't add any JavaScript and it doesn't change any classes or IDs, then how does it go about validating? Well, it does it because of some libraries, but also through the use of the data star metadata attributes in HTML5. So I'll show you an example of that here in just a moment, but that's the first thing that it needs to latch onto. It adds these data dash star, or which star stands for anything, so you can make them anything you want as long as it's meaningful to your application. As long as it adds those metadata attributes to your HTML5, then it also has to have the jQuery validate script and the jQuery validate unobtrusive script. And I'm calling them scripts, but they're actually plugins. So by default, you can see that these features were turned on. Now we turned them both off here in the previous video, but by default they are turned to true in both cases. You can also change them programmatically through a helper method. So you can go like at html.enable client validation equals true, at html.enable unobtrusive JavaScript equals true. Okay. And so you might be asking yourself, well, what is the fundamental difference between it? So I ran the application twice. The first time I turned on client validation enabled but left unobtrusive JavaScript enabled off. And then the second time I turned on both client validation and unobtrusive JavaScript. And so I've got this little web page here that allowed me to paste in when I viewed code for both versions of the page. It allows me to compare the two files against each other to see what has changed between them. So on the left hand side is the version that is only client-side validation. On the right side is the unobtrusive JavaScript version. And so you can see at first there's not a lot of differences between the two. When we get near to the form, things start to change. And recall, this side is the just the plain old vanilla client-side validation. It adds an ID. It adds this div tag with these the class for validation errors, and it adds an ID to that as well. As we scroll down, you can see the input class has changed whenever we had an error on that particular field. In this case, the fields were both empty. You can see that it adds classes to the input fields. And the reason why this is bad is because it might inadvertently change the styling of these input fields. And then let's scroll down a little bit further. Right after the form, you can see that there's some JavaScript that's inserted, whereas in the unobtrusive it doesn't exist. And then here, I guess that's pretty much it. So when you compare what's on the left with what's on the right, you'll see that there's almost nothing, and the things that are different, that have changed, you can see they're all these data dash val equals true, data dash val dash length equals, and then the error message for it being too long, data val length max 10, data val required equals. So if it's a required error problem, then it's going to print out this error message. Okay, and the same is true with the one below it. I think it will have something different here. Yeah. So here's the regex error, data val regex. The field price must match the regular expression, and then it gives it, which that's not a very friendly error message. And then it gives the actual pattern. Looks like there's another required field. Okay, so those data dash val and the various ones that are used through here are then looked for inside of those scripts, that jQuery validate plugin and the jQuery validate unobtrusive plugin. Now, if the jQuery validate and jQuery validate unobtrusive plugins are not present in your HTML, then nothing happens. Those metadata attributes, the data dash star attributes, are just ignored. If the scripts are present but the unobtrusive JavaScript is turned off in the web config, then it won't emit that data dash star, that metadata attribute. Okay, so if that's the case, then nothing happens as either, because nothing has been inserted into the HTML5. But when both the scripts are there and the unobtrusive JavaScript is enabled, setting this to true, then you get the desired functionality that we've been talking about. Now, since we used the scaffolding feature way back to create all this CRUD functionality, create, rate, update, delete, the unobtrusive JavaScript is turned on and the validation scripts are added. So where are they added at? If you take a look at the create.cshtml, again, this is in the views products create.cshtml, you'll see at the very bottom it adds those script references. The first reference it adds is to jQuery, and then it adds the jQuery validate min.js, the minified versions of both validate and validate.unobtrusive. Okay. However, these scripts, these references to scripts, are not added by default, and they're not even added into the scripts folder by default. So let's do this. I'm going to spin up a new version of Visual Studio, and I'm going to create a new project, a new web application, and click OK. I'm going to make it an empty MVC application and click OK. And then what I want to do is take a look at a couple of things. Notice that the web.config, we do get those two app settings are created and the values are set to true. However, there's no scripts folder in this blank app, and if we were to create a new controller and then add a view, we wouldn't see the references to those scripts. Okay, so how do you add those scripts to your application? Well, you could go through and do it all manually. You could download it, those scripts, those plugins from various sources, and then you can input them manually into your application, or you can use NuGet, and it makes it a lot easier. So we're going to go to Tools, NuGet Package Manager, and we'll go to Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. And here what you want to do is type in the following, and I'm going to go ahead and put this on a slide. Microsoft jQuery unobtrusive validation. Okay, make sure you type that in. Let's go back here, and I'm going to search for that phrase. And if at first it doesn't find it, make sure you search online, keep looking, because it's definitely in there. You also want to make sure that it's by Microsoft, okay? And you'll notice that this particular one, it has dependencies on jQuery validation and jQuery itself. All right, so it'll install everything that you need to make this work. So I'm going to go ahead and click the install, I'm going to say yes, I want to install it to that particular project in my solution. I accept the terms of the license. And now it's been installed. I'll click close, and now we can see what's been added here. The scripts folder will now have will exist, and then it will have jQuery, jQuery validate, and jQuery validate unobtrusive, and the minified versions of each. Okay. And even though those exist, you still have to add the scripts in your view. So if I were to let's go ahead and just add a controller and go through that whole thing. So you're not going to be able to see it, it's off screen, but I'm adding an empty controller and call this home. And then I'm going to right click on index and select add view. Again, it popped off the screen, but we've done this a bunch of times, right? I'm not going to change anything. And here we would still have to add those 2 lines of code, all right, in order to get this the unobtrusive and the validation to work. All right, and then you have to make sure that you have the exact version of jQuery available that there's a dependency on. Okay, so in our case, let's see if they added. Yeah, they have a specific version of jQuery, and you'll notice if we go back over to our application, they use a very specific version of jQuery, 1.10.2. The unobtrusive and the validate don't have that dependency. Here, let me get rid of that and open up 3 again. They can use anything greater than 1.8. So we could update jQuery. You'll notice though that, again, just to point out here, that they use a specific version of jQuery, and I think it's been downloaded into the scripts folder, obviously. Then you'll want to also see that in the layout there's another reference to jQuery here as well. So it'll all get sorted out in the end. They just don't take any chances in the boilerplate code. All right, there is one downside to using unobtrusive JavaScript validation, and unfortunately the jQuery validate unobtrusive plugin doesn't play nicely with Bootstrap. So it doesn't add the classes to highlight the various fields or tooltips, the things that you get out of the box with Bootstrap, the stylings that you get. So fortunately there are a bunch of workarounds. A lot of people have run into this. I honestly don't have one that I recommend, and I haven't gotten into it that deeply yet. But again, many people have run into this situation and have posted their solutions. So just do some searches and you'll find some on Stack Exchange or one of those types of websites, ASP.net, that will the forums that will give you a proposed solution to that problem. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up everything I wanted to say about validation, with one exception, and we'll talk about making sure the form has actually been posted back from a client and not from some robot or script. Okay, and we'll do that in the next video. Thanks.